Europe, the sixth largest continent on the planet. In reality, Europe is a sizable peninsula of the huge Eurasian landmass. By custom, it is divided from Asia by the Caucasus and the Caspian Sea in the southeast, and the Black Sea, the Bosporus, the Sea of Marmara, and the Dardanelles in the south. In the east, it is divided from Asia by the Urals and the Ural River. It is separated from Africa by the Mediterranean Sea and the Strait of Gibraltar. Europe is bordered by the Atlantic Ocean, which connects to the North Sea and the Baltic Sea, and the Arctic Ocean in its north and west respectively. However, rivers are drying up all over this continent. The terrible drought that has been affecting Europe has exposed riverbeds and dried out farmland. In addition to harming farmers, dried up rivers have also damaged the energy industry, hydropower generation, other power stations, cooling systems, and river transportation. The canals are bare, reservoirs are now nothing but dust. Additionally, the droughts have brought to light old warnings from Europe that we should heed. But why are the rivers in Europe drying up? Does this portend future events? Are drying rivers a warning of Europe's tomorrow? Join us as we explore why Europe's rivers are finally drying up and why something terrifying is happening. The greatest dry spell in 500 years has affected over two-thirds of Europe, and according to scientists, global warming has played a significant role in the disaster. Many of the continent's waterways, both large and small, from the Loire to the Rhine, have been severely damaged by the heatwave, with a variety of secondary repercussions on Europe's food supply, trade, water access, energy systems, and environment. And experts caution that some of these streams might never recover if hot, dry summers turn out to be a persistent trend. The lack of water in Europe's landscape is enormous, and it only becomes worse each year that it's not replaced. Groundwater has been depleted, glaciers that supply rivers have receded even more, and the landscape that has long supported populations and ecosystems has been altered by the drought conditions that have occurred in 4 of the last 5 years. The warm waters of the Rhône and Garonne in France made it more difficult for nuclear power facilities to cool their systems, requiring several of them to reduce their production. And hundreds of the major rivers' tributaries are in far worse shape. Many are completely dry. The River Rhône is one of the major rivers of Europe. It rises in the Swiss Alps, passes through Lake Geneva, and then runs through southeastern France. At Arles, near its mouth on the Mediterranean Sea, the river divides into 2 branches, known as the Grande Rhône and the Petite Rhône. The resulting delta constitutes the Camargue region. On the other hand, the Loire, the Doubs, the Dordogne, and the Garonne have all been severely depleted by the most severe drought France has ever known. As a result, hundreds of municipalities now require drinking water to be transported by truck. And for every EU citizen, Europe's waterways move nearly 1 ton of freight annually, and they generate about $80 billion in economic output only from transportation. The Rhine became so malnourished that enormous sandbars breached its middle, preventing fully loaded barges from delivering goods to the industrial centers of Germany's Ruhr Valley. Due to Russia's gas and coal embargoes, the coal and fuel that pass over the Rhine and other rivers are of great importance. Additionally, the unheard-of price of French electricity, which has soared to a staggering €900 per megawatt hour, more than 10 times the price 2 years ago, has been impacted by the unavoidable outages at France's nuclear power plants caused by a scarcity of cooling water. And according to scientists, the destruction of the river's economic value is merely a portion of the issue. Salts are diluted less and a river runs more slowly the less water there is in the system as a whole. As a result, the water becomes saltier and hotter, which can be fatal for many kinds of river life, including European grayling, barbel, and Danube salmon, among many others. And aside from feeding algae blooms, higher temperatures can also be hazardous to river systems. This is what happened in a number of German rivers, including the Moselle, the Neckar, and maybe the Oder River, where more than 100 metric tons, 220,000 pounds of dead fish, including perch, catfish, pike, and asp, washed up on its beaches in less than a week in the middle of August of last year. In Germany 2 years ago, there were record floods that resulted in more than 150 fatalities. The same area saw record-breaking droughts the previous year. And in contrast, the Rhine saw extremely low water levels on average once every 50 years. Germany, meanwhile, is now experiencing a drought for the 3rd time in less than 20 years, following those in 2003 and 2018. And the fact that the Rhine dried up weeks sooner during last year's drought than it did during past droughts makes the issue worse. And the issue could get far worse as Europe is just now starting to experience its traditionally driest season. Scientists point out that while the plight of Europe's main rivers has garnered attention, the smaller rivers really suffer more than they should. There is not a drop of water to be found on so many of them. And when this occurs, they permanently lose their entire community of biodiversity. The next time it rains, it won't simply come back. The longest river in Italy, the Dry Po, has a flow that is 1/10 of normal and water levels that are 2 meters below average. Corn and risotto rice production has been severely impacted by the absence of consistent rainfall in the area since last November. Between 30 and 40% of Italy's agricultural production is produced in the Po Valley, but rice growers in particular have warned that up to 60% of their crop may be lost due to paddy fields drying out and becoming contaminated by seawater drawn in by the low river level. And the high temperature and slow flow of the river's delta close to Venice has decreased the oxygen concentration of the water to the point where an estimated 30% of clams growing in the lagoon have already perished, and many more species can die as a result of low river levels and hot water. But the Danube Basin's overall low water levels from Bavaria to the Black Sea are perhaps the most concerning. The Danube Basin is the second longest in Europe after the Volga. It covers 10% of continental Europe. It rises in the Black Forest Mountains of western Germany and flows for some 1,770 miles, 2,850 kilometers to its mouth on the Black Sea. Along its course, it passes through 10 countries: Germany, Austria, Slovakia, Hungary, Croatia, Serbia, Bulgaria, Romania, Moldova, and Ukraine. The Danube has played a vital role in the settlement and political evolution of Central and Southeastern Europe. Its banks, lined with castles and fortresses, formed a boundary between great empires, and its waters served as a vital commercial highway between nations. However, the once mighty Danube, relied on for survival for generations, has been drained by extreme drought and unusually high temperatures, upsetting all of Zimnich's residents, port employees, farmers, members of the shipping business, fishers, restaurant owners, and families. Never in recent memory has the river been so low, leaving broad stretches of the riverbed exposed along Zimnich's shorelines, with the dead mollusks serving as evidence of the terrible damage done to riverine life. Numerous freight barges wait immobile in Zimnich's harbor for their turn to use the sole canal deep enough for passage while the Danube flows at less than half its regular summer volume. And in order to conserve drinkable water from the Danube, locals are collecting the meager rainwater to utilize for home needs. The new beaches along the shoreline are populated by children. Even the oldest residents of Novi Sad, Serbia's second largest city, had never seen anybody cross the Danube by wading over it because the river is so low there. There are entire wharves and their ships stuck on dried riverbeds, and hitherto unknown islands have appeared in the nearby shallows. Farmers from Novi Sad's neighboring prosperous agricultural regions have asked the government to declare a state of emergency, and a somber reminder of the past has surfaced. Scores of sunken German battleships from World War II are now discernible in the dwindling river near the Serbian town of Prahovo downstream of Novi Sad, with some still carrying live ammunition. They serve as a reminder of the atrocities done by the Germans against the Serbian people and highlight the ongoing consequences of those atrocities. The dry weather is also bringing back what some people believe to be ominous signs from the past. And as rivers in Central Europe dry up, they expose the so-called Hungersteine or hunger stones, a form of low water mark unique to that region of the world. Only when water levels are exceptionally low are these rocks visible. They have been inscribed with dates or sayings commemorating the event and have been interpreted throughout history as warning signs of impending crop failures and even famine. One of the more notable hunger stones was discovered in Germany's Elbe River. It reads, "When you see me, weep." The purpose of this stone is to serve as a warning that, should such a low water level be achieved, future generations should be ready to face another horrific famine. A harsh reality is slamming into our carefree world. Ukraine used to be the 7th largest producer of wheat in the world, but the country's capacity to harvest and sell its crop has been severely constrained by Russia's invasion. The greatest gas exporter in the world, Russia, has severely cut back on its shipments to Europe. As a result, for our generation, the dread of starvation and freezing in the coming winter is more real than ever. On top of everything else, inflation has depleted many people's money and the government has run out of ways to assist. This indicates that in the following months, the poor will suffer the most. A believer in God may be perplexed as to why God permits Europe to experience terrible weather curses at what seems to be the worst possible time. However, the Bible teaches that God not only permits weather disasters, but also deliberately employs them to forewarn our planet. In the past, individuals used catastrophic weather events as an excuse to change their ways and turn to God. According to scientists, the centuries of engineering and human activity along Europe's rivers also had an impact. The straightening of formerly wild rivers, deforestation, dam construction, industrial pollution, wastewater discharges, and agriculture's encroachment on wetlands and shorelines have increased the susceptibility of Europe's rivers to heat waves, low water levels, and floods. Our river systems are all quite susceptible and dispersed. The fundamental issue is exactly the same. Rivers and river basins that have undergone extensive modification cannot retain water for extended periods of time. Natural ecosystems in good health can exchange water like a sponge, but ours can no longer do so. Because rain cannot penetrate sealed surfaces and because heavy rain following a drought cannot penetrate dry soils, we lose a lot of water. Surface runoff enters channelized, swift-moving rivers that seldom interact with local aquifers. Therefore, the authorities' automatic response to dredging further misses the real issue. In actuality, it makes it worse. Naturally, the long-term goal of slowing global warming will be necessary to resolve the catastrophe that is currently playing out along Europe's rivers. But the immediate need, according to scientists, is for governments to address other issues that are placing stress on the continent's rivers, such as implementing stricter wetland regulations. Thankfully, the glaciers still exist and serve as a reserve for the larger rivers during dry spells. However, according to climate change models, they will vanish in 30 years. This raises serious concerns. Let us know what you think in the comments.